I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. All right, what's up, world? Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like. Live right here at Black Power Media. Again, I'm Jared Ball, very happy to be your host. Please jump in, invite others to join you. And if at any point anybody who's here wants to jump in and join me for a comment or a response at some point, I'm happy to have that happen. I think we should get back to doing that some more. Um, so nope, it's not a rerun. And greetings, Semantics FM, and everybody else as you start to come in. But anyway, wanted to just get to something that is somewhat breaking news. I don't know though, but that has revived some memories and rekindled what I think are some important concerns facing the Black left in particular, but everyone in general. So definitely jump on in, and if you have anything you want to add, please, of course,
put it in the comments.
And I will even happily drop the link in if anybody wants to join at some point. But let me just go ahead and get started with what I'm talking about. So Bill Fletcher Jr. Published a piece in The Nation magazine that calls out Black Alliance for Peace, among others on the left. And yes, while I am technically a member of BAP and certainly support and agree with, if not everything, a majority, overwhelmingly, of their politics and analysis and directives, I'm actually more concerned with the cycle that I think is reflective in what Fletcher has done here and has done over the years, as I'll talk a little bit about today, and that I would like in some small way for BPM, all of us, to find ways to correct. I invited Bill to join us. I invited Bill also to debate members or someone from BAP, since he called out the organization. He declined, as he generally has done in my experience over the years. And we'll come back to a little bit of that as well. But I just to put it out there that was an attempt made, and I've known Bill for a while. We don't always agree, and often do not agree, but I've at least thought enough of him and have had enough respect that I've wanted to at least engage at times in discussion and debate. And then when he calls out comrades, or even if I wasn't any way affiliated with BAP or its membership, just the politics that I feel like is more important than anything that he has called out and been dismissive of, that I think is a problem. And then I admit, even as I said to my man Frank Wilderson, who's I consider a comrade and I consider on his intellectual team in some way at least, even him publishing in The Nation a critique of the left, or the Black left in particular, in any way, I think is like, I'm always concerned like that. Why is that the space for it? But anyway, we'll come back to some of that as well. So again, welcome everybody. And like I said, in a few minutes, I'm going to just lay out my 2 cents. And if anybody wants to join me, I'll jump back in the chat and put the link in the chat if you want to join me on the platform, or I'll at least check for your comments. All right. So that said, let me get started here by pulling up the piece that Bill wrote. And again, I've known Bill for a while and have worked with him at times, have, sought out working with him at times. I've been impressed, particularly on his analysis at times of the labor movement in the US. So I've always, wanted to support, but obviously I was not we were on opposite ends when he took over Black Commentator years ago. And I think ever since then he has seen me more of on Glenn Ford's team, which is true. And that even came up in our email exchange vis-a-vis this article where I was inviting him on, and it was kind of like, well, essentially, actually, what I said was, "Would you come on and debate somebody from BAP?" And he said, "No," given his antagonistic history with Glenn Ford and Ajamu Baraka. And I said, "But I wasn't inviting necessarily to be Ajamu, but you called out the whole organization in your article here. So would anyone from the organization?" And he declined that as well. So I don't agree with that methodologically, tactically. I don't agree with not engaging the Black left when uh, you have a public critique of that community, and when you are happy to go to the Real News Network or the Nation magazine to criticize them in ways that I think Bill does unfairly. I think it would be better methodologically, tactically, if he would be open to. But this has been a consistent issue with me, with whether it was Bill Fletcher or the founders of Black Lives Matter. I've never, or anybody, I don't agree with. I've even said this about Mark Lamont Hill on when he was doing work with the Black News Channel. I don't agree with this inability or refusal to Killer Mike, to debate or discuss or engage people to your left, particularly on the Black left. It doesn't have to be with hostility. It doesn't have to be with derision. It can just be to lay out the differences. And if they're, anyway, all right, okay. So Bill says nothing is worse than silence in the face of aggression. Now, my humble interpretation of this was also that this. I don't think he makes the point in the piece, but that this is that kind of that reference to silence is betrayal from Dr. King. So I do have admittedly a bias, a visceral bias, that when I see people I don't think are as left as King using or alluding to King as a way of positioning themselves. So that's how I took that. But anyway, and it starts off here, the announcement. The announcement of the Ukraine Solidarity Network is a small step in breaking a strange combination of silence, ambivalence, and complicity within some left-leaning circles regarding the Russian aggression against Ukraine. Code Pink, for instance, which is outspoken on international affairs, falls into the ambivalent category, criticizing the Russian invasion but not supporting Ukrainian resistance. Black Alliance for Peace is an example of a group that is complicit through its support of the invasion. So I admit also a visceral reaction to the use of the term complicit. I kind of even made a joke about that on Twitter. I don't, so first of all, by the way, this is one of the reasons why I wanted him to engage someone from BAP who has a stronger grasp on the politics of BAP and their analysis, and someone who and could offer us, I think, a fruitful exchange. By the way, this is why I posted the other day, or reposted, the audio from what I think is the classic debate that ultimately came down to being between Amiri Baraka and Bill Fletcher regarding Manning Marable's Malcolm X book. Because I think in that debate, Bill shows, as Amiri says, you're hiding your ideological position under claims of poor history or disingenuous attacks on Malcolm's sexuality or something like that, and not wanting to put on the table that what you really have is a problem with the internationalist, socialist, Pan-African, whatever variety of politics that Malcolm represented. And I think that is ultimately at play here. That Fletcher, under the guise of an attack of an irresponsible, immature left, is really denying that there is an underpinning, or underneath all of that is this ideological difference, a political difference around which way forward. And that's cool. I just think it should be laid out, as Baraka said to him in that debate. Lay it out, make it plain. I would think that would be of great benefit to everyone's constituencies, and to particularly young people who I think would benefit greatly from hearing seasoned experts with differing analyses, even if they don't like each other, debating and discussing. So I also felt that this piece, as he starts to in this next chapter, Bill does what I was saying he did back when he was defending Marable's book and refusing to debate me or anyone else. I'm glad that debate at the Left Forum happened with Baraka and um, um, I'm not. I just went blank on who else was there. Because I've always dwindled it down to Baraka Fletcher, Hakeem Adabudi, and I think I'm forgetting someone else. But anyway, but I'm glad that took place. But I think that, and that's why I titled my repost of it, "The Debate That Ended All Debates?" Question mark, because I think that was the last time Bill was willing to publicly engage the Black left. Baraka, rightfully so, had earned the right to have Bill, panel with him and disagree. But I don't think I'm not aware that Bill has done that with anyone else. I invited it several times in a number of different ways, and I've never seen it happen. And it's almost always the same thing, as was the case with this issue around Zimbabwe some years ago, where Obi Igbuna and others were critical of Bill's stance against Mugabe. And when I was doing radio, then offered to debate, Bill didn't want to do it. And with the same kind of thing, they make it personal. They And I keep saying to him, give me some credit. I'm not going to sit here as a host, even if I disagree with Bill. I'm not interested in having people come on here and just diss him and name call. I'm interested, as I said in my email to him, that the ideas be allowed to flourish. So this whole thing of we can't have a principled debate. I don't accept that. So anyway, but Bill does the same thing, and then he holds up this straw. To his credit, he mentions Black Alliance for Peace and even links in this article to BAP's statement on Ukraine, but he doesn't engage their actual analysis. So it's technically a citation and a reference, but he never doesn't actually engage the ideas, which is what a debate would force him to do, and that's what I want to see. So then he does this thing about talking about the end of the Cold War and turns towards capitalism within China, blah 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 blah. And people can I've already linked everything in the show description. They can read it for themselves. But he moves on to do what I'm saying, that he creates these straw references that don't go anywhere. So he says Zimbabwe under former President Robert Mugabe is a case in point. The Ortega regime in Nicaragua is a more current example. In both cases, the left-wing bona fides of these regimes covered over an increasingly authoritarian approach, often mixed with corruption. But that, from my humble opinion and memory, and this is why I wanted Bill to engage, because he doesn't do it in these pieces, the left, as I'm describing them, to his left politically, whether it's BAP or anyone else, whether it was even Obi back then, whether it was any of the other people defending Mugabe back then, much of the defense of Mugabe had little to do with a blind defense of his machinations and his wife's machinations within the country. In fact, I challenged Obi on that on my show, and kind of got some pushback from the left I enjoy for seemingly to be critical of Mugabe myself. But my point was, I'm not, anyway. But I'm saying, but the critique of Mugabe was rare, or the defense of Mugabe was rarely about defending Mugabe, defending his administration as an infallible, flawless entity. It was about defending Zimbabwe's sovereignty against critiques that were born out of Western imperialism. So again, there's this nuanced lane that I think Bill historically, traditionally, routinely avoids by throwing up these straws. It's easy for someone, particularly writing to a Nation magazine audience, to say that Ortega and Mugabe are increasingly authoritarian and mixed with corruption, and their administrations are mixed with corruption. It's easy to say that. Nobody's going to push back on that. BAP has sent people to Nicaragua. Others go to, I mean, people have like clear analyses and experiences there. People, you know, they have, people can explain themselves beyond being dismissed as childishly supporting anyone who is against the United States, which is ultimately what a lot of what Bill's critique seems to land on. He continues down here, rather than undertake critical examination of each situation, the impulse was to react or to go silent. To the two case examples earlier, Mugabe's Zimbabwe and Ortega's Nicaragua, I would add that the allegedly anti-imperialist theocracy in Iran. The Ukraine Solidarity Network was founded with an emphasis on opposition to great power domination, the right of nation self-determination, and the respect for national sovereignty and the right to self-defense in the face of aggression. Okay, I mean, who disagrees with that? But I think the argument would be, how does supporting a US-backed regime and all that the US had done to support the NATO encroachment and the overthrow in 24, all that, like all that stuff, like he mentions all that stuff, but somehow can characterize a support of all of that as opposition to great power domination. I'm confused by it. I would like to hear him explain that. I would have liked to hear that be explained. By the way, this next line bothered me. I gotta say, because he makes reference to the fact that he was willing to sit down and have a disagreement with Noam Chomsky on the Real News Network. And that's again sort of my point. Why is Noam Chomsky and the Real News Network a worthy platform and discussant, and no one from BAP and BPM or any other platform where the Black left is engaged as a primary audience? That's not, Bill's not interested in that. So he'll throw up the Black left in conjunction with other groups, and just as he was doing that when he was, you know, people who are critical of Marable's book on Malcolm X are they just have a problem with Malcolm being described as gay. I mean, he was saying that at the time. I wrote him several emails back then saying, come on, my man, my argument alone has nothing to do with that. Engage me, if no one else. And he would never do that. So that was always frustrating. Now, by the way, to be fair, there have been over the years times where Bill and I have been on a similar page and have worked together. For instance, when he interviewed us around our George Jackson mixtape when he was working with Telesur, I believe, or something like that. You know, like I'm not, so I don't want to, you know, I want to be fair here, but there's but whether it's with his Aurora project and electoral politics that I briefly passed through years ago, or all these other examples, we generally are not able to, you know, and on this I just can't agree. And more so, and really, as a non-expert on these issues, I'm more concerned methodologically with Bill's approach to critiquing the Black left and not engaging the Black left. So theoretically, from my humble point of view, being a non-expert, he might be right. What if BAP is wrong? I'll just throw that out there just as a thought experiment. Methodologically, it's not demonstrated in these approaches, and it doesn't help anybody to clarify their argument. So I get it if he feels if he has ever felt that people have been personally rude. I get that, not wanting to engage that. But in which case, debate someone else from within that organization, since you are calling them out. That would have been I think, better methodologically and more helpful. Anyway, so he continues here. The last time I checked, those of us on the left side of the aisle were supposed to stand in opposition to spheres of influence. We do so by standing in favor of the right of nations to self-determination. So again, does Russia not count in that? When the US is messing with them, expanding NATO against their agreements and supporting regimes that are looking to you know, I mean, like, does Russia not count? And then when is sovereignty or when is self-determination self-determined or determined by others? Because it seems like Ukraine's self-determination has a lot is being Ukraine's self-determination is being led by a determined US foreign policy. So it's like if the US is guiding your foreign policy, then that version of self-determination counts. Our network stands resolutely in favor of peace, but not the peace of the graveyard. A cessation of hostilities by the aggressor, Russia, and their withdrawal of troops would be a start. Comprehensive negotiations and would ultimately be necessary in order to guarantee peace and security for Russia and Ukraine. But as we covered here on the platform, I think on the remix, and I think Jackie covered it with Ajamu else on her show or on her elsewhere by herself, that statement from the Ukraine Solidarity Committee supports violence. I read it that way, and war. So it is a piece of the graveyard as long as the people in the graveyard are Russians. No, maybe, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. That's why, Bill, you should have helped me get. No, I'm just playing. Many sincere people believe that supporting the right of Ukrainians to armed resistance somehow encourages war, with the possibility of escalations. However, no similar objection was ever raised in 1935 when Ethiopia was invaded by fascist Italy and begged for support. Yo, Bill, I would have loved to have seen this part engaged. What in the world? What in the world? What in the world is, you know what? Let me see if I can appease this request I'm just now getting. Forgive me, everybody. I'm going to see if I can appease this request. But if when I first saw that, I'm thinking, how can you what in the world does so first, oh man, so now obviously the point is to equate Russia invading Ukraine with Italy invading Ethiopia. I would love to hear that explained, because I admit, obviously, I have a bias here, but I don't see that as being the same. I don't see Italy and Russia as doing the same thing. First of all, Italy was in the African continent expanding its empire. Russia is, after years of warnings and its borders being encroached upon and agreements being abandoned, is invading a neighboring country with a history of back and forth violence. So I'm just not seeing the equivalence. So let me just finish this part up here before I bring on our guest, who our first guest, perhaps. So anyway, Bill concludes here: in the face of Russia's naked aggression, the signatories to the Ukraine Solidarity Network concluded that the voices of support for resistance should not rely on a hypocritical U.S. government, a government that supports Israeli aggression and apartheid against the Palestinians and the Moroccan aggression in the occupation of Western Sahara. The voices in support of resistance needed to be the voices for international solidarity of the oppressed. So my final question to Bill for this piece would have been: how does this, for me, confused logic work? How does condemning an anti-imperialist Black left and left in general that wants to end the violence by not just starting with a critique of Russia's latest actions. How does doing that stand against the United States government's leadership, hypocritical leadership, as he describes it? When I don't, how does that work? So it just sounds like it's like a last paragraph flourish of left-leaning positions to brand or rebrand or position Bill as the legitimate left and anyone to his left as illegitimate and immature. All right, so I'll stop there for now, and let me bring in our guest who's joining us by phone, Brother Netfa. Good morning. Thanks for joining us. Member of BAPCA out there in the streets doing the work. I didn't ask if you wanted to join me this morning. I'm glad you can jump on for a minute. I don't know how much you've heard or seen of what I was saying. I was just going through Bill's piece from The Nation. So if you want, we can start there. But what I'll just invite you to say whatever you want to say to get us started.
Yeah, thanks for indulging me, man. And I hope, this is kind of awkward. I'm driving actually, and I don't
Be
know, you
safe.
might have to
Stay safe.
control
It
my
sounds it sounds good.
audio.
No, you sound
All right.
fine, but just drive safely. We got you.
Okay. But so I might not be able to mute myself if I need to. So you might have to mute me
I
and
got you.
whatever.
I
But
got you.
anyway, and I hope I missed like the maybe first 10 or 15 minutes, and then when I did, and I got on, I tried to, text you that message and request, and so I did hear some of the critique of, some of it in terms of where you were. The first, I don't know where to start. The first thing that in terms of this other what seems to be trying to pass for a breakdown of our position is off the mark, like you said. It's a bizarre comparisons that they're making. Not only that, it's like this to say some of these things he's saying. There was no opposition then. I don't know what that's supposed to mean. These things were, I don't know. These were decades before any of us were even born. So even if there
Right.
were some kind of legitimate comparison, it doesn't really make sense to say there was no. I don't understand that. But so how we're judged based on something like in the 30s and stuff like that, and it's kind of strange. But main thing that I wanted to say when I first, it's just a lot of strange stuff there, and like you say, in general, he's not really addressing the analysis that we have. It's all side steps, and oversimplified it, essentially making straw man arguments against what the positions are. And
Mm-hmm.
but I wanted to get across something that's even deeper than Bill and goes into even to some extent, but also complicit is this Ukraine Solidarity Network is the dire situation that we're in and what this buttresses in terms of anything that strengthens the white supremacist capitalist patriarchal disposition of NATO, the U.S. and NATO, is an existential threat to humanity. And so they're really playing. And then in this instance, with Ukraine and Russia and NATO and Russia, it's really playing with a very an atomic bomb, a neutron bomb type of thing. I mean, actually, pun intended, these nuclear weapons and whatnot. And it just to call for an escalation and some kind of way consider yourself some kind of leftist anti-war, anti-imperialist type of thing, and then you have to create some absurdities called new imperialism and stuff. Is really uh, it's really it's giving cover to this thing, this Nathan, or helping it, helping giving, so confusing the people when people need to have more clarity, they bring less, and that which means that the people in the U.S. in particular, but even other places, are not able to situate up to raise an opposition, to even consider an opposition to what's happening is important. It can't one there's and I don't, you might have gotten to this part. There's a contradiction of lobs of finance capital and money and all this kind of stuff being given to fuel this conflict, this war, to the neglect of the people in this country who have, dire, and just country in the world have serious needs. But then that aside, how dangerous it is to not be, to see what's primary, the principal contradiction in the world, and the Ukraine conflict being only one of them, is this full spectrum dominance, this pursuit, insatiable pursuit of capital, and and hegemony by the United States and NATO forces, led by the United States. It is a very dangerous. We're living in dangerous times, and we got to be able to see, determine what's primary. And actually there's more need now. I feel like I'm rambling a little bit. Sorry, I can't take some young people trying to do something good in the community. I gotta tell them no. But anyway, they're giving away food and stuff. That's nice. This is Southeast, and see, look at it. I mean, in a way, you could tie this in. They're giving away food. They're looking at me like I'm crazy because I'm denying the food. But they're, why should the people have to be in the streets doing all this for everybody when the state is giving funding to death and destruction?
So Nefa, if I can, and let me.
Sorry.
Yeah, Nefa, hold on. I'm going to mute you for a second. I got a little bit of an issue with my own audio here. What's happening here? I'm not even sure what's going on. But anyway, I hope I'm being heard all right. I don't know. Now all of a sudden I think I don't know. Anyway, what I wanted to do was what is going on with my my audio? Okay. Anyway, let me just, Nefa, before I bring you back on, let me just go through a little bit of what I found in BAP's statement that I think is important. And again, to whatever credit they deserve, Bill and the Nation magazine at least put a link to this. Now, I'm never convinced that people will follow through and read it and then, have its sentiment take hold. But at least, to be fair, it's there. But just a couple things from Black Alliance for Peace's statement. Black Alliance for Peace emphatically declares that the conflict in the Ukraine emerges from the ceaseless and single-minded drive of the U.S., NATO, and European Union for global economic and political dominance. The genesis of the current crisis, as BAP has previously asserted, is the 2014 U.S.-backed coup of Ukraine's democratically elected government and in the determination of the U.S., EU, NATO axis of domination to convert Ukraine into a heavily militarized NATO member nation lurking on the border of the Russian Federation. So I would have liked to have even just been able to have Bill respond to that initial position of BAP that he is holding up for criticism. Excuse me, and then to have a discussion with a BAP representative as to why that approach differs from Bill's own approach and that of this Ukraine Solidarity Network, and what does that mean in terms of how we move forward, how we understand things, and what conclusions we reach. Now, similar to what Bill does in his piece, he does attempt to define peace and what they mean. So Black Alliance for Peace does the same thing. But what is peace? For BAP, peace is not merely the absence of conflict. Peace means the achievement through popular struggle and self-defense of a world liberated from militarism and nuclear proliferation, imperialism and unjust war, patriarchy and white supremacy. Indeed, the resurgence and celebration of Nazism in the Ukraine, as well as in the United States, Canada, and elsewhere, represents a global consolidation of white supremacy as part of the project of imperialism. Again, I've linked the entire statement in the show description, and Neff, I'm bringing you back on, unmuting you to ask you if you want to elaborate any further on BAP's statement, as it relates there. We see your feet there, so I'm
Oh, my
not
bad.
sure if that's the view you're looking for us to get.
Nope.
But
How do I change it?
you got to flip the camera, or but um,
One second.
but I thought that that was a key point in the difference between Bill and BAP's statement. That is this approach as to the nature of the conflict and the U.S.'s role in the conflict, and then of course what would lead to a legitimate peace. And again, I just don't think. Oh, and we lost Netfa, so we'll hopefully get Netfa to join us back. Um, Again, I just don't think Bill addresses that, and then leaves us with this sort of empty statement that is very pro Nation magazine. I think, primarily affluent, white, middle class, liberal Democrats. And Neff, I think I'm going to try to I think we have you back at least by
Yeah,
phone.
but I don't know how to do this.
So
Can
I'm
you
just
hear me?
gonna yeah, I'm just gonna I think we should just turn your
Go
camera
ahead.
off and have you join by
Okay.
audio only.
Okay. Cool.
So yeah, let's just do
Yeah.
that. And but so I don't know if I just read a little bit of BAP's statement on this
Mm-hmm.
subject, and was trying to just make the point that I think that the differences in approach in terms of how BAP um conceives of the problem and addresses themselves to the problem, is what Bill has a problem with, but doesn't want to actually engage. And then desiring to speak to, again, a more affluent, white, liberal, democratic audience, is happy to cut himself off from a more left and black position taken by BAP, leaving us with, I think, an empty analysis.
Mm-hmm.
Or
And
yeah.
yeah, and in some ways, maybe even they try to exploit some of it, because some of the stuff that in the Ukraine statement thing, not just his, because if we go out of that and look at the statement the Ukraine has in terms of uh, calling for, like almost recognizing the right of people to armed struggle type of thing that they're claiming, and that's the Black radical tradition. That's our position, right? And like you pointed out earlier, it's misapplied here. So this is not, because if you look at this is why they have to sidestep the details and the analysis of the situation, because then if you forward the self-determination of people, then the U.S. 2014 and before, prior interference in Ukraine comes into play. Where does that, where's self-determination is that? The people in the Donbass region, Russian-speaking Ukrainians, and where does that come into play? All of that becomes, so that's also what makes our position in terms of defining peace, and it being based on popular struggle. Anything, not defining peace, defining human rights, defining all is what we're calling people-centered, right? People-centered definitions of things, people-centered applications of principles, are why we do it that way, because then you can't, it helps us be consistent, right? And so I don't remember if he defines peace in there, but for us it also helps us, as particularly African people or Black people within the radical Black tradition, see how, and because people will see how various things are impacting them, connected to them too. So there's a humanity aspect to it in terms of the people as human, humanist and egalitarians, that the people of Donbass and the struggling people deserve not to be subject to the NATO's, designs. But at the same time, we also look at how this so-called adventure is impacting people in, African people on the continent of Africa, in the United States. Is not just like we just taking this principled position about, because they can't look at that. That's not something they can look at with their position and their definition of it. Because if you look at it, it ain't faring too good for us. A lot. In terms
Yeah.
of how that's
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
in terms of how that's impacting us. Even they can't even address things like this bill, that this legislation that this Meeks Gregory Meeks introduced on behalf on the effects impact that dictates to African countries what positions they should be having around Ukraine. That's their attempt to do it. But it's designed. It's called I can't remember the full thing. It's called the Countering Malign Russian Activities in Africa Act. Basically, it's a breach of the sovereignty. So they can't address any of that. Ultimately, while they keep saying, like him, and even in the statement, Bill, and even in the statement, they make this reference, these passing references to being opposed to U.S. I don't even know if they say imperialism, but aggression or whatever, however they put it. This is consistent. It's consistent with Bill and these people, but particularly, it's always a reference made, but only to justify and the claim that they are, but only to justify the positions that they take that are completely aligned with U.S. imperialism. It's just to say that they did, because as you see, we point out in our, and people, I don't know if you mentioned it, but Jacqueline Luqman and Jamu also both wrote pieces in Black Agenda Report, and I don't know if that respond directly to this Ukraine solidarity thing, and just happen to come out the same time Bill's thing are. But in those pieces and before that, we talk about the other contradictions, which I think I heard you mention. Some of these other contradictions, the drone wars in Somalia, the decimation of Libya.
Well, that's what I pulled up for the BAT piece again to show again somewhat of what you're talking about here. In fact, specifically what you're talking about here, and to juxtapose it to the way Bill's Nation article makes reference to previous struggles, specifically in Africa, in Ethiopia, and vis-a-vis the invasion of Italy. And what I think is interesting in that sort of, again, confused, cherry-picked example that I think he misrepresents. Black Alliance for Peace statement here makes allusions and reference to the African continent and other parts of the world, but again, to make a very different point. So as it says here, the Black Alliance for Peace is mindful of the loss of life in Ukraine, but also in Somalia, Yemen, and every nation suffering under NATO wars of domination. So Bill is happy to make a reference to the Italian invasion of Ethiopia, but is ignoring the NATO component of even this conflict. And as BAP points out in their statement, is appropriately referenced here. We offer our unwavering solidarity with the people of these places, as BAP Coordinating Committee member Rafiki Morris argues. Our concern for the people of Ukraine must be added to our overarching concern for those in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, Yemen, Libya, coups in Egypt, Honduras, Ukraine, Bolivia, Brazil, subversion in Venezuela, Nicaragua, Cuba, coups across the African continent with soldiers trained by AFRICOM. So none of that is considered by Bill's piece, and none of the reference. So, and his reference to Nicaragua is to suggest that BAP's analysis is retrograde, as it would have been vis-a-vis Mugabe in Zimbabwe. But here again, BAP is clearly laying out a position that I would love to have heard Bill, more than just link to in an article, actually respond to, either in writing or in direct conversation with someone here or elsewhere.
Right, exactly. But I mean, what kind of response can you get? I would love to hear that too. It's like you can't really give it. But there's another thing here, that this mention of being opposed to U.S. stuff. I mean, I forget how he mentions it always. It's always like a sentence and a little passing thing. It's really to keep their left cover. It's really to drape themselves in a leftist cover, and that they, as a leftist, phony left, they can inject them the purpose, the role and purpose they serve, whether they're honest about it. I mean, whether they realize it or not, I don't understand. It's really irrelevant. That they help the enemies of humanity foster confusion, keep people disoriented to understanding the role and the primary contradictions in the world. For example, and then one of these things we have to, like, the enemy advances and tries to carry out his stuff and tries to do damage control in terms of they're trying to save their legitimacy in the eyes of the people. They, even though they'll resort to repression, they always also require some level of legitimacy. And you've heard, and we used to talk about, especially when Glenn was pointing out the crisis of legitimacy that the imperialists face, right? And that they, in order to do so, they have to level the most sophisticated forms of propaganda and illusion and all of that. And one of the latest ones that Bill and them are helping Bill, or just this Ukraine and all these leftists, Howie Hawkins, all of them, whoever's on there. And some of them may not, I've heard it said that some of them may not have known what they're signing, but they're on there now, and until they take their name off, they have to. That is the one of the latest things is this so-called responsibility to protect. It's different from the more openly hawkish. We gonna go here, and this is our way, the highway. You're either with us or against us. It's more sophisticated. Or Obama helped refine it, and so now that now what Bill and them come to say is that whenever there's some conflict, let's say in Ukraine or say in Libya or whatever, or where they have sanctions against Nicaragua or anything like that, then we know that the U.S. has some messed up intentions, but in this instance, quote unquote, the inferences in this instance, quote unquote, they're right. In this instance, the good is being supported here, even if indirectly, which is some crap, they have serious, their designs are the same, and that what it doesn't do is it obscures and makes less perceivable the complexity and context of any given geopolitical situation. If that makes sense. So I mean, he's mentioning things like Zimbabwe and on, and so if you notice, they have to do the same thing that the U.S. does, is reduce things to individuals. Putin's war, Mugabe's taking of the land, Mugabe's thing, Mugabe's Zimbabwe, all that kind of stuff. Ortega, they have to do the same thing, in which we know that things are always more complex with any given situation. That they have, there's processes in government. No matter how you whatever kind of position we come up with, we have to go into the how things are governed. What is the geopolitical context? What are the forces, internal and external, to any government or any country that are at play here? And they have to kind of obscure that. And what they do, and I think Bill's probably the best at it. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to leave soon. What is the very sophisticated in how they write and how they make it seem like they're having a principled and even sophisticated, like intelligent conversation about things.
That's it. I agree with that part fully, and that's the part I've always struggled with and found disingenuous in these kinds of public critiques and condemnations and refusal to engage those, under claims of some other lack of principle on the other side or something like that. But anyway, so we can come back to this if you or anyone else likes, but I did want to also, since you're here, I did get to follow up with your Voices with Vision interview with Justin Hansford, which I would encourage people to go check out. And I'll actually add to the show description just to make sure to help out with that. But let me just, because I think there's some overlap here in terms of this critique that I'm having of Bill's critique of BAP and other elements of the left. So and just again, just to remind folks, as we've talked about throughout the platform, on the remix, on this show, elsewhere, and then of course on NETFA's Voices with Vision, Tuesday mornings, WPFW in Washington, DC. You had this back and forth with and about Justin Hansford and his and others' critique of the Durban Conference in 2001 in South Africa, and a general approach to Black liberation going forward. And I just a couple of things I wanted to I thought, I mean, it was again, to me, see if I can put this clearly. I felt like hearing Justin in that discussion with you was an audio version of what I was reading in Bill Fletcher's critique in The Nation magazine. And what I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's like this what I consider to be a confused claim that somehow working with the US state, or at least being aligned with its project goals, is the best lane for us to be in, to achieve, in Bill Fletcher's case, a legitimate left progressive advanced world, and in Justin Hansford's case, a black-led race first Garveyite revolution. And I just can't get my head around it. That's how at least I heard what he was saying. So when he was praising as an advance, for instance, the adoption of a Dr. King holiday as a federal holiday in the United States is some sort of evidence of an advancement in the state's perspective of King, or the way that he said that that the Durban conference was too multiracial and not black-led and black-focused enough, whereas what he was involved in is somehow, as I wrote here in my note, a Blinken-supported space that is all black is still, to me, less helpful than a radically internationalist gathering that was occurring in Durban. But he was recharacterizing it, that is Hansford, and in his discussion with you, as if a Blinken State Department supported effort that claims to be in the tradition of Garvey and black leadership is somehow better in addressing itself to the concerns of African people than a radically internationalist gathering, or as you alluded to in reference, Bang Dung and a non-aligned movement type of thing. So again, I'm dovetailing all of these, or overlapping all of these in my mind with this nominal, what I'm considering this major problem of, and maybe I feel like it's even an increasing problem, of a projected nominally black radical approach to the world that isn't. So I don't know if any of that made sense to you or anyone else. Please jump in and let me know if I covered any of what that interview accurately or not, or what you think of what I've had to say there.
It was, I mean, I think you laid it out, articulated it very well, better than I would have thought. Maybe would have come to mind to me in terms of the contradictions there, the very contradictions. I would say the one thing about the difference between them is it seems like Bill doesn't really even try to say he's representing black anything anymore. I don't really hear him say it that much. If I mean, I don't hear him say it, period. And he certainly, his associations and affiliations don't seem to reflect that much anymore, as far as I can tell. All those people that are signed on, and all of them, reflect the class. But the other thing is, and then Justin, he's talking about, he did a lot of talking about his affiliations and what he went through, and Malcolm X grassroots movement, all that kind of stuff. But and then and solidly claiming Garveyite stuff that Bill wouldn't be doing. But yeah, I think I think all of this, you're right, is seems to be something. There's a parallel, a connection here, and then and the connection, I think, is reflected in confusion, like how the situation in the world, but even in the world, is changing, as it's developing in a certain way. The contradictions are becoming sharper, and the people are having to make decisions about what role they play in it, and how they, I'm sorry, I have to plug in my phone, and how they analyze the situation, and then where they are in it. So you got Bill playing his thing. Justin, I don't know if he's out to, I think it seems like this is an opportunity that arose for him to be a part of, and he jumped on it. And I don't know if I've known Justin for a while, way before we go back. And that it just seems like he's not really seeing this thing for what it is, for whatever reasons. I don't care, I'm not going to try to speculate. And that it's the conversation we have. One is that, and so it's really, it's what we're seeing with Justin is almost this, what we've seen in the movements, in the recent movements in terms of Black Lives Matter, so to speak, ethos and all that. Whereas this uh this claim or whatever to be more revolution. Oh, we're click Jack. I'm sorry. That we're abolitionists. We're this. We're that. But at the same time, what they advocating is more watered down. It's less radical. It's not recognizing the clear contradictions. Like abolition. If we're not talking about what does abolition mean in this? It resorts to obscure kind of things, and then at the same time, resorting to in the end to reformism kind of shit. So that's not that's contradictory to the radical politics that they're trying to claim. And so like and in this instance, one thing I wish I had done is not just focused on the Durban Declaration program of action, which seemed to be the center of that been the contradiction that seemed to emerge in Geneva, and it was talked about on our show, but even more broadly, this formation, this United Nations Permanent Forum for People of African Descent that he was part of, that people came, it's their first session, and people were coming to. So Mama Fia Wangaza and Tunde Osazuwa, who were there, Tunde, there on behalf of BAP, were pointing out that this whole process that is flawed and has issues and seems to be a circumventing of the initial intent of what happened in Durban and what came out of it, and that an example of that was how this wholesale dismissal of the Durban Declaration of program of action, that it starts with that. Justin was saying, "Oh, I respect it," and he kept saying and concurring with me, is that should it be a building block? But at the same time, what I don't know if I make clear, he actually went on and say, "Well, if this thing, if it's not useful to us, it should be relegated to the dustbin of history." Well, you're already wholesale dismissing the thing you claim to respect, and you're not even describing what in it makes it have to get to that level of dismissal already. This document is 120 something, 150 pages, and it goes into a lot. Yeah, there's some stuff that could be more radical, but it's a whole lot. Even if it's universal in its even in one, it's universal in terms of its issues, like poverty. Poverty affects more than Black people, right? But it affects Black people. So I mean, the fact that there's having things in there, and I'm just looking at one thing that can be advancement for Black people, and you can be applied to us. This other stuff, it's like an obscurity and a vagueness that they're resorting to say, well, we got a chance to make something this Black. I was like, well, what is it being Black? It's almost, what makes him and I also had another conversation about African socialism, which makes it more complicated. But where's the and I don't want to get cut off on them, but what there are, I might have lost my train of thought doing that. There's things that are just universally applicable that can specifically help Black people, and we could just adopt. Just like you said, I mean, you actually said it better than what I'm getting at. You actually said a radical, like Bandung, like internationalist space is not all Black. It can come up with much better things for Black people than something that's all Black but endorsed by our enemies and okay with them. That
Yeah,
kind
and what I would also have to admit is I'm pulling back up here now the final line from Bill Fletcher's article, because I think what Bill does, again, what I think Bill does in ending his article here is what I heard Justin doing in your conversation, which is it's these radical flourishes, rhetorical flourishes of allusions to Garvey and all Blackness and saying all this stuff, abolition and recounting his own history in the Malcolm X grassroots movement, where I was with him at the time. And I'll speak for myself self-critically. I don't know that we were ever rising to any sort of threatening level, but you know, but making those references to his being tear gassed in Ferguson, it all started to sound a lot like, you know, okay, here we go again with Sharpton and Jesse Jackson saying, you know, John Lewis saying I got beaten on the bridge, and you know, so when I take a very conservative position politically today, you can't get mad at me. You know, it's like, you know, I mean, I'm not moved by that. Yeah,
that's funny
go ahead.
that you say that, because we ended up having more of a conversation after the recording was over. And I told him exactly that. I said, don't keep saying that. I'm like, don't keep saying that kind of stuff. I said, Al Sharpton could be claiming he got beaten. You know?
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to go.
Okay, no problem, no problem.
They getting ready.
No, I appreciate you for jumping in real quick. No, I appreciate you jumping in real quick. I know
That
you out
wasn't
there,
the police, by the way. That was Max messing with me, talking about move it along.
Oh,
but
okay.
Anyway.
Yeah, Max said what's up. Shout out to Paka. I know you out there doing the good work, and we thank you very much. Thanks again for joining us, man. Appreciate you.
Man, thank you. All right, talk
anytime. All right, peace. Always good to hear from Netfa. In any form we can get him, and he is literally out there doing the work of the people with Pan-African Community Action. So shout out to him, Max Ramo in the background as well. So anyway, that was really all I had. I did drop the link in the chat. If I'm assuming nobody had anything else to say. There was one question. How do we expose that type of underhanded discussion for more people that that just read and get drawn in? Yeah, honestly, I don't know, other than what we're trying to do here. I think that and I'll just say, I'll say it this way. The more we grow platforms like this, so make sure everybody is, you know, the more we can, because that's really, I think that's really the only, you know, organize and all, you know, but I do think we have to create alternative spaces that become maybe too big to omit or ignore, that don't allow for people to go to platforms like The Nation or the Real News Network or Democracy Now or wherever else as the target space for outlining a radical agenda. I you know, those spaces don't invite these analyses often enough. So we have to, you know, that's really it. I don't know how else to do it, because they don't engage. Again, I'm not equating myself to Chomsky in any way. I mean, he's earned a stature there, but if Bill will engage him on the Real News Network, but not engage anyone from BAP or a Black left that are even his peers on this or another platform, I find that to be, that's just a challenge. I mean, it's the same thing I've been saying about my own little personal exchanges with others. Like, they will go on more popular platforms and malign us or our work, but not feel it necessary. I mean, it's like you'll talk to everybody, but us or the people you're being critical of. So I don't know. Are there any debates planned to be held on BPM? Not that I'm aware of. I don't know what others on the platform are putting together, but not that I'm aware of. I mentioned in my leftover segment yesterday that I'd like to talk to BPM about building out a major conference. But I don't know. I don't know. I love the question. I'm open to hearing suggestions and figuring out ways, but I don't know. Anyway. All right, good people. Thanks again to NETFA. Thanks again to Black Alliance for Peace. And thanks to Bill Fletcher and The Nation magazine. And thanks to all the remixers who joined us here live and those who will see this later. Of course, to you, we say peace if you're willing to fight for it. As Fred Hampton used to say, make sure if you've got something to say that you
put it in the comments
and help us all to become
the Court's top thought leader,
so we can all drop.
Yeah, listen, that's called my boy. You know nothing about that.
And then we can win.
Did you call bank? I called game.
And I'll catch you next time. And I mix what I like and throughout the BPM platform. Stay tuned. Warrior class coming up in a couple hours and much more throughout the weekend, Sundays, and who knows what else might happen. I might pop up again. If I finish this McLuhan piece, I might pop up again. So make sure you got everything. Click that bell so you don't miss anything. And yeah. Catch you next time. Peace. Is you willing? Only if you're willing to fight for it, like Fred Hampton used to say. Thanks again, everybody.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.